attended council hearings in person. You've tuned into our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now, you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify our work and the people who do it. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you. Deep voice person with a funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the Council. You may also know me as the Council's voice on social media, at Council of DC. And we are thrilled today to be back with Ward 6 Councilmember Charles Allen. Thank you again. I recognize the kind indulgence of you all taking time to be on our show.
Happy to do it, Josh. It's good to see you again.
Appreciate it. I haven't seen you since 7-something last night when our ledge meeting ended.
It's been hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, the topics we're going to talk about today are some environmental legislation in various phases that you have been closely involved with. And let's start with healthy homes.
Sure.
So can you give me the quick summary of what that bill would do?
Absolutely. So think about it for a second too, about what's precipitating it. One is that we know we need to, from a climate action perspective, we've got to try to electrify everything. We need to get off natural gas, which is a fossil fuel that gets piped in. And we've got to be able to create sustainable renewable energy sources and electrify. We also know that in people's homes, the actual air quality from burning methane gas means that you have less healthy air. And when we look in our city, we actually have a pretty big disparity when you think about like childhood asthma and air quality issues that disproportionately hurt lower income households. Now let's think about what some of the solutions are. On the federal side, you remember a year or two ago, Congress and the president passed the bipartisan infrastructure law and created also IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. Those created a lot of incentives for homeowners to be able to swap out old fossil fuel burning appliances. Think about like your hot water heater, your HVAC and your heating and cooling systems. Think about your oven and be able to incentivize people to move towards electric. The way they did that, though, is by giving you tax rebates. So that's great for somebody like me who might be saying, you know, I'm probably going to make this decision anyway. I'm going to front the cost of what it takes to do that. And then that rebate on the back end kind of helps me rationalize my decision. If you're a low-income household, a working household, you don't have the money in the first place to do an electrification or to swap out appliances or to get a new heater, to get a new hot water heater. This will, for the first time, and it will be the first in the country, create real equity into climate action. So what it'll do is for 30,000 households by 2040, it will actually pay for those changes to take place. Make sure that the electrical system is up to speed. Make sure those appliances get swapped out. Those things can cost tens of thousands of dollars. And this is going to be a way that the district lives our values of climate action, but also lives our values of equity to make sure that we are prioritizing our lower income and middle income households to make sure we make that change. And the last thing I'll point is, the reason why this is also important is as we see households switch to electric, and if we only just let the people who can afford to do so drive that action, what you're going to end up with is your lower income households will have to bear the burden of all the legacy costs of all the gas lines and all the pipes that are in the ground. And they will, while everyone else is really proud of themselves, they no longer have to pay a gas bill. You end up with lower income households that bear the burden. Healthy homes will make sure that we have better air quality in homes, a more equitable way to be able to actually take climate action. At the end of the day, it's just a lot more affordable for people, and in particular, more affordable for lower income households.
And to be clear, this is an incentive that is offered to people to opt in.
You might have read on Twitter that I personally will be coming to everyone's homes, take their gas stove, put it on my back, and carry it out of their house. That, in fact, is not true. It is a completely voluntary, incentive-based program so that no one's going to come for your gas oven, no one's going to come for your stove unless you ask them to.
I wonder if you get the question from foodies, because foodies are awfully attached to gas stoves as opposed to electric.
The gas industry did an amazing job in the 50s and 60s of convincing us that. And I'm actually in the process of swapping out a gas stove for electric right now myself. I know people who swear by their gas. That's also why this is voluntary, right? It's creating incentives. I think that it would be very difficult legislatively. And I think also people would probably kind of bristle if we just say, you know what, we're just coming to take out your appliance. We want to have people be able to do it of their own volition. We want to create the incentives to make that happen. And that's why there's a lot of education and outreach that kind of goes into legislation like this to help people understand why to take this step and then provide the resources to let them be able to do it. The other piece I'll add is, I mean, when we talk about climate action, I know this is the right thing to do for our environment, it's the right thing to do for our climate. What doesn't get talked about enough, this is the right thing to do for jobs. This is about the future of our city. And there is so much work that's going to be coming down the line to be able to help create jobs and all of this work. This legislation creates a huge workforce incentive and a big push to make sure that we are training up the people who are going to be the electricians, the people that are going to have to be the contractors. If we don't do it, we're already far behind. If we don't do it, Maryland and Virginia residents and contractors are going to have all the jobs. And that's probably really great news for Virginia and Maryland. But I want DC residents and DC businesses to get these jobs. And so as we are going to see over the next decade, a massive push in electrification, I want that to be DC jobs. So there's a huge workforce component to this that I think helps set people up for jobs and careers that really is what our future is going to look like.
And in addition to keeping the jobs local, is there also an equity piece to the hiring piece, an effort to get folks who most need well-paid, sustainable jobs to get those jobs?
A master electrician is a phenomenal job. Great pay. You can run your own business. Those are jobs and trades that we want to have. Frankly, we are understaffed in that career, that job in the district. We've got to do more. So the legislation creates a lot of incentives to help create the pipeline of more people who are going to enter into that trade and then help make sure that they are able to compete and get these jobs. This is jobs. Why do we see a lot of red states that are actually all of a sudden, you know, they're the ones building the electric vehicle stations, or they're building out big solar arrays? It's not because they're doing it for climate action. They're doing it for jobs. We've got to be better about focusing on the jobs, because that's where I think the future is. Not just let's make sure we're doing the right thing by climate action. We've got to make sure we're doing the right thing by jobs.
Now, what you had mentioned this a little bit, that on social media, people are saying you're coming to take the gas stoves. Why do you think gas stoves is such a culture war touch point? You know, it seems like a number of years ago, it was light bulbs. It was that, you know, you couldn't have your old Thomas Edison light bulb because the horrible
Josh, they're desperate. They're desperate for anything to turn into a culture war. It's the only currency they have. They don't have ideas. They don't have much. So they just want to try to constantly scare and divide you. That's it. So yesterday it was light bulbs. Today it's a gas stove. Tomorrow it's going to be something else. We can't let ourselves not make the right decision and not take action because we're scared someone's going to yell at us on social media. Like that's just what they do. That's social media was built for that. So it's just whatever the latest culture war of the day is, and we just can't buy into that.
And also, I think technology rises to the challenge that initially the non-Edison light bulbs did throw a weird light and, you know, were flickered and were a little challenged. But then as demand increased due to incentive measures, the technology improved and now they're basically interchangeable. And I feel like that's any qualms people do have with electric appliances, they'll, you know, the technology will catch up soon thereafter because of incentives like this. When do you think you get to a tipping point? You know, obviously there's the like any technology, there's sort of early adopters. They're the folks that will opt into this. But I think you envision a situation where more and more people go fully electric in their homes. How do you keep that momentum going?
Let's switch gears and talk about a different push, and that's on electric vehicles. So, and because I think that gives you a really great example of where you see that tipping point happening. So we're also working on legislation to dramatically expand electric vehicle charging stations. So the ability to be able to find reliably electric vehicle charging. The city on that front is also way behind. But think about a car ownership. Typically, people own a car about 8 years. Could be 10, could be 12, but the average is about 8 years. So the car you buy today, if it's a regular traditional gas vehicle, it's going to be the early 2030s before you're probably looking for another vehicle or trading that in. So the decisions we make now are really important because it takes at least 10 to 20 years to actually cycle through just the normal and natural decision making that takes place. So that's why it's really important. And the tipping point, I think, for a lot of folks will be whatever their next purchase they're going to make. So over the next 5 years, you really will start to see more people take advantage of the lowered costs, the more competitive marketplace. But if we don't have an electric vehicle charging infrastructure, that's the number one thing besides the price of the car that people say, well, I may not buy the electric vehicle. Maybe I'll wait till the next car. That's the one I'm going to be electric. So we've got to create the incentives to have the electric charging structures. And that'll help with that tipping point you're talking about.
And what is the situation with the, just to pivot back to healthy homes for 1 minute, in terms of where we are in the legislative process, I think that bill had a markup recently. So its next step, you can maybe talk about timing, is going before the full council.
Yeah, for all the people in the future watching this. So today is March 6th. So in early March, we had the committee vote and markup and unanimously approved. The next step has to go to the full committee of the whole, chaired by Bill Mendelson. And then after that, we'll move towards a legislative meeting. It's already fully funded. So the dollars are there waiting for this law to get passed. So the next step is we need the chairman and the full council to approve it. And that's going to come. The chairman has supported this bill. So it's just more a matter of timing at this point.
Gotcha. Then pivoting back to the EV bill, that bill is waiting for markup. Is that now you introduced the bill and it was referred to your committee? So you're kind of in the driver's seat for when that happens.
I'm driving the electric vehicle.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even do that. It just comes next.
It's got that one's our next bill. So we have we passed, if you remember, the STEER Act, which was in January. We focused on that had to do with improving the way in which we hold dangerous drivers accountable. So that was a major bill to completely rewrite how we get at dangerous drivers. Second one that we've just done is healthy homes. So that one's a major focus on electrification and improving and taking environmental action. Third is going to be our electric vehicle. So that's coming up next. So that you'll see us move towards a markup in that very soon.
Now, I'm always very alert because council members are getting more and more into the game of having acronyms in their bill titles. And I was trying to, the Comprehensive Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Access, Readiness, and Sustainability Amendment Act. It spells KVRSA. Now, it seems like work went into the title, but it doesn't quite stick the landing in terms of the acronym.
That one we didn't do an acronym on that one. We did with the STEER Act. And then if you remember many years ago, one of my favorite acronym bills was the Miss Frisbee Act, which was all about actually rodent abatement. And so we decided to come up with a great acronym for that bill based off the character in the children's novel, Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. And it was a lot of fun to see that the parents were the ones who figured out the acronym on that one.
Yeah, no, that was also a person.
So just little Easter eggs. Sometimes you just kind of like drop in somewhere.
Yeah, I'm there for it, but
yeah, you unless you've got a good one, I don't even know what that acronym could be for this bill.
Now, one thing, and in a minute I want to pivot to e-bikes, but on electric vehicles, like you said, that is all about infrastructure, incentivizing infrastructure, and not incentivizing directly the purchase of vehicles, whereas the bikes bill is based more on the purchase of the vehicle. So talk about, just from a, getting into the weeds a bit, the policy standpoint, how is that decision made to not incentivize people to buy EVs, but to facilitate use of the EVs once they buy them?
Well, because we have federal legislation that is actually creating very substantial thousands of dollars worth of rebates. I don't think the district needs to add on to that. you can get a very substantial federal rebate for that electric vehicle purchase. So we're not going in that realm. The same is not true though for electric bikes. And so as we looked at the e-bike option, which continues to grow in popularity, and it's a game changer for folks to be able to get around the city, that one we wanted to create a more direct incentive on the cost.
And why do you think the feds are slow to get to the e-bike incentive? I mean, that seems like that'd be super useful.
I think it's politics. I think you got there's more people in a car than there are on a bike right now. So it's easier to give a big incentive for that car purchase than for a bike because you've got a larger stakeholder group.
Do you think you're starting to see a tipping point with e-bikes, particularly in the
absolutely. Yeah. I think you have so many more people that actually are getting on an e-bike, and when they get on the e-bike, it just changes their world. I mean, they can replace so many trips they have to otherwise take by car. They can move through their city, their neighborhood a lot faster. It's comfortable. It's fun. It also is one that if you're on your way into work in July, you don't get to work a sweaty mess. You actually are coming in with a little breeze in your hair. So it's a really great way to get around the city. And I think people are really loving it. It's a great way, whether you got a family and you're getting the kids and dropping them off at school, whether you're running to the store or just kind of getting around. It's a great way to do it. And so I think we continue to see kind of this massive growth of e-bikes.
And it looked like from looking at some of the testimony on the bill that it won over a lot of non-bike, quote unquote, bike people that never expected to find themselves on an e-bike did. Talk a bit about that.
Well, I think people find that once you get on the e-bike, you may have some kind of misconceptions about what it is or how to get around. But once you are moving around, the speed and ease with which you can move around your city or your neighborhood is great. You got a hill, it's nothing. You're able to handle it very well. So even somebody who's not looking to be an all-star athlete, but they just want to be able to get around on bike rather than a car. And listen, let me tell you about parking. Your parking options on a bike are so much greater than in a car. How many times I have ridden a bike somewhere to the same destination, somebody else took a car and I was there 15 minutes before they were. It's fantastic because you're not spending dead time just looking for parking.
And are there plans to, again, speaking of a tipping point, as more and more people adopt that as a mode of transportation, is there going to be more bike parking available? Because if people are just locking to no parking signs on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to build out bike infrastructure at the same time. So making sure you've got parking is really important. I think the city continues to build out more and more bike racks and more secure parking. Because if you see a place where people are locked up to signs or even making a really bad decision, if they lock up to like a tree or something, that tells you have not created enough parking. You've got to find ways to create more parking there.
And what if anything is being done, because the e-bikes, with the incentive obviously are easier to buy, but are still a rather pricey thing. And a car, you can't walk off with the car, but you can. They're still heavy, but you can walk off with an e-bike. So is there any thought being given to security? In my building, we had an issue with e-bikes being stolen, and
we've got an issue with cars being stolen. I mean, I think unfortunately a really significant. Last year we saw a massive increase, and we're not alone. The rest of the country saw this too, but especially with the Kia and Hyundai challenges, the number of car thefts just skyrocketed, and it's dangerous. And it's, of course, if it's your vehicle, it's absolutely traumatic and a very big deal to lose your car. That could be your livelihood. That could be the way you get to your kids to school. It's very distressing. So whether it's a car or a bike, those are really high priorities to stop that type of theft, that type of crime from taking place. Now, to your question about how the program works, it not only helps incentivize the cost of an e-bike, it also helps incentivize the cost of a bike lock or other things around security. Much in the same way we provide free wheel locks and clubs for people for their cars. I think it is a reality that we just make sure we're providing those types of support for security steps. So we do it both for cars and for bikes.
And also, I'm assuming since these bikes would come with manufacturer chargers, because we are starting to see an uptick in battery fires when people are using subpar batteries or subpar battery chargers.
And yeah, in that regard, one of the things we did, we actually worked with some of the federal energy agencies as well as the consumer agencies, and they actually rate batteries by certain standards to make sure that they're actually the right type of standard that you do not have fires. And so the only eligibility for the district incentive is for that highly rated battery. So we make sure we're, the ones that you've seen in the news where somebody's battery was charging and it caught fire, those are things you probably bought off, some little weird website and got shipped in from China. This is got to be a highly rated, highly regulated battery for it to be eligible for the incentive.
And there's a equity piece built into the bike incentive as well, if memory serves. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, just like as we talked about healthy homes, I think one of the things we're really trying to do in this committee and what I'm trying to prioritize is that in the spaces where we're working on transportation, in the spaces where we're working on environmental action, climate action, that we really live our values by putting equity first. So 50% of all of the incentives for the bike purchases have to go to what we call within the legislation qualified applicants, which essentially means anybody who's eligible for SNAP benefits. So we really are targeting lower income working families to make sure that that's where the incentive goes.
And the e-bike bill is already law and is already funded.
Yep.
But are regulations out? Has the application process begun? Or if no, not when?
DDOT, again, it's March 6th. DDOT actually is about to roll it out. So you should see it coming very, very soon. They're going to be rolling this out. They've got hundreds and hundreds of people that have already reached out to them with interest. We've got the bike shops lined up that they're ready to go, because this also has a really big small business component. It's going to help our local businesses a lot because that's where you got to buy your bike from. So you're going to see your local businesses see a really big line of new customers coming in, which is going to be great. So stay tuned. It should be coming very soon.
And I would think in part because of the equity piece that hopefully uptake will be citywide. I think there's sort of a stereotype that this would interest certain parts of the city, but it seems like from the hearing testimony, the broad interest geographically.
Absolutely.
And you said the electric vehicle bill is also, or was it Healthy Homes that you said was already pre-funded?
Healthy Homes was pre-funded. So it has no fiscal impact because we already got the money ready for it. We just got to get this thing over the finish line.
Gotcha. The other issue I want to ask you about, because again, if we don't want to spend our whole interview talking about cynical people on social media, but folks say when you go to electric vehicles, there's still an environmental impact. The impact is in terms of mining, the environmental impact of digging the minerals out of the earth and so forth. What is your pushback on that?
Well, I don't push back on that because they're 100% correct. There is an environmental impact even for an electric vehicle. The pushback is take mass transit. That's why we focus so much on WMATA, why we're trying to focus on rail and bus, because even with an electric vehicle, it is better than a traditional gas burning vehicle for the emissions in your neighborhood, but you're still just one vehicle on the road. So now I take a bus, especially if I can get it to an electric bus or an electric rail, right? I can, instead of moving 1 or 2 people per vehicle, I can now move hundreds of people per vehicle. So I don't believe we're going to move to a place where there just are no cars. So it is better that car be an electric vehicle. But I also want to move as many people as possible onto mass transit. That is the most efficient. It is the most climate friendly approach for us to take, hands down.
And are the rules for taking e-bikes on Metro Bus and Metro Rail, is there any distinction made, or is it just anywhere you can take a bike, you can take an e-bike?
Correct.
And if I noticed correctly, there is now an EV charging station at the Wilson building, which
I think I saw that it was just maybe a week or 2 ago.
But that I believe is just for electric fleet vehicles serving, for now at least, the district government vehicles.
Yes, the district government vehicles were changed over to electric vehicles. So now we have the electric vehicles themselves, but we had no charger. Now we have a charger. So now those electric vehicles can get charged.
Gotcha. Uh, okay. Then I think it is. Oh, do you have plans for other incentives moving forward to further incentivize electric vehicles, electric bikes? I know, like in Paris, for example, they're looking at moderating parking fees, where there'd be reduced parking fees for more environmentally responsible vehicles, and increased for less responsible. Is anything like that on the right?
I think we've tried to structure a bit of this around like the weight and size. I know there have been discussions around that of how do you help structure so that not all vehicles are equal. So if you've got a massive, very large, very heavy vehicle, you have one kind of impact you're creating on the street. And if you have a smaller electric vehicle, you have a different impact. So I think we're trying to make our policies and our rules be able to be nuanced and understand that.
Yeah, because I remember like when hybrids first came out and they were allowed to use the HOV lanes.
Yeah.
It wasn't a financial incentive, but it was a lifestyle incentive.
But those are the carrots that people try to use to be able to help incentivize the uptake. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're going to pivot to the fun closeout round. And the question that we've asked the last couple council members it's a kind of a two-part question.
All right.
The first is, if you were trying to build a perfect council member using traits and characteristics of colleagues, past or present, how would you piece together a perfect council member? And you can use pieces of your own persona in doing this. The more fun version, which people generally don't opt into, but a little bit, is building a terrible Frankenstein council member, taking all of the worst traits, the chairman's fashion sense, and,
I'm
cobbling
sure
a
that
terrible council member. So if you want to engage in either of those past or present colleagues, have at it.
I'm sure that whoever I say, there's going to be something negative someone else would say about them. So while I can highlight the positives, I'll leave it to somebody else who will say that was the Frankenstein version. All right, I think 4 members would come to mind if I can merge 4 members into one. Can I do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I would merge, I think, kind of the vision that, and I'm gonna use 2 council members on this one. I think the vision that like Mary Chey and Tommy Wells would bring to sort of think about the future of our city and not being afraid to kind of tackle big topics. I would merge the tenacity of David Catania in oversight, who was one of the most prepared, deep, thick 3-ring binder type of council members who would just go at issues and just deep oversight. I would combine maybe the absolutely incredible people skills of Marion Barry, who could relate to and talk to absolutely anybody, and was just stunning to watch, his natural ability. And then I would combine the joy that Yvette Alexander would bring to things. She was one of the most happy and joyful people that I ever worked with. Even on things we disagreed with, she is an incredible, joyful person.
Yes, and that was readily visible on the dais, where
Yes.
she and her neighbors on the dais would frequently get in trouble.
All the time.
Due to the joy. No joy is allowed. And what would you pull from yourself, if anything?
That's a setup question. I mean, obviously, I've tried to be the best of all those things together, but we are all fallible, and so we all constantly are trying to work and learn. I think it's one of those things where I do try to be very good at oversight. I do try to be very good at being prepared. I think I try my best to lay out a vision. I try to be my best to lay out some joy, and I try to do my best to make sure that I'm a good listener and be able to relate to everybody, no matter who it is that walks and crosses my threshold. So hopefully I can at least try to replicate some of these great qualities that I listed.
And I will say, as an ANC treasurer, I did have to testify before David Catania when he was on the council and had that committee. And I will say that it was nerve-wracking.
Yes.
It's a little bit similar to the feeling you get talking to the chairman, where you work on something full time. They are taking 1 minute of their busy life to ask you a question. They somehow come up with a question with that minute that you don't have an answer to, despite the fact that you spend your whole life on this topic. That is quite a skill set. Well, thank you very much for indulging the perfect council member game, and I'm offline. I'll get your thoughts on Frankenstein.
Yeah, we'll do that one offline completely.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like I'm not sticking my neck out by throwing the chairman's fashion sense under the bus. That was my effort to.
Yeah. No, good for you. Yeah.
What are you going to do? Anyway, thank you very, very much. I'm very grateful to you, as always, for being on the show. Listeners, remember to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search under Hearing the Council. Thanks again, listeners, for joining us. Tune in next time. We're on DC Radio at 96.3 on your FM HD4 dial or dcradio.gov. I'm Josh Gibson. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Thanks, council member. Have a good day.
Thanks, Josh.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.